Okay, everybody, good afternoon. So if you could go ahead and turn your cameras and your mics on so we can get started, that would be good. See some new faces, see some old faces, not that old, but old as in I saw you on Tuesday. Some of you were able to add the class, so that's exciting. Welcome to the class. So can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. So my plan for today is to make today will be partially a lecture, but we'll also do some in-class activities. And you know, it's going to be different at each session. So if you could just be sure that you have handy on your computer or printed out your the map quiz that you completed, that would be great. If you haven't been able to do it after class, give me heads up on what's going on with that, and we can see if we can find a solution. Moodle, I think, was down. Did you guys see that it was down this afternoon a little bit? All right. For me, it was down. So when I went to go check a few more times, I couldn't get into Moodle. So that may be an issue for you, and if so, I am still taking those by email, your map quizzes, if they're not in the folder on Moodle where I asked you to put them. So before I get started, today is Thursday. Let's see. It's about 1 o'clock. So I want to ask everybody, how are you guys doing? How are things going for you across the world?
They're going fine.
Going fine? So it's Naya, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And where are you?
I'm just in Springfield.
Springfield. Okay, not too far from campus.
Things are good. It's cloudy today.
It's cloudy today. Okay, that's good to know. I'm where I'm at. It's really hot, and there's no AC, so that's why I'm going to be sweating like a lot during
Yeah, it's in the mid 70s here, so it's honestly I feel cold.
I can handle some cold right now, but I feel you. I feel you, Carrie. So let's go ahead and sort of get started. Today, our goal is to sort of begin to talk about Japan as a place and as a sort of a cultural entity, and then we'll start with the history more in earnest next class. But so I'm gonna kind of go over some things that you had in the textbook in the first few pages. We talked last class about this assignment, either on Moodle or using the HackyTrust emergency access. Should be able to get a hold of the introduction to the Modern Japan textbook. And then I'm going to use some of the things from that to talk about Japan as a place. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you so you can see, and we'll take some breaks along the way as well. So, okay, sharing screen. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint? Can I get a yes or a thumbs up on the PowerPoint? All right, thank you. Yeah. I can see Carrie's stomach, I can see Samsung. Very good. Okay, so and so Japan is about the size of California, which is not very big, but it's actually a country, and that's what makes it so interesting. And you can go over those data points on that if you'd like more in the book, but this is a good sort of comparison point. If you think about a country that is smaller, I mean, a bit larger than California, and just how much it has been influential in the history of not only East Asia, but the globe, kind of like England, which is also very small and becomes, as you know, quite important in the history of the world as well. So I think Japan can be sort of seen as maybe the England of Asia, small but influential and powerful. And I want to sort of quickly jump to the next thing. I want us to talk about where things are located in Japan, so you can, when you see a name or a location or a region, you can understand which part of Japan we're talking about. So this is the map from the map quiz. A bit blurry here, but this is the map. And what I want to try and do now is I want to actually divide you guys up into groups and breakout rooms. And I want to use this as a chance for you guys to briefly get acquainted, but also to sort of begin to think about the Japan's topography. So I'm going to create groups. I'm going to assign you to groups. In your group, I'm going to ask you, of about 4 or 5 people probably in your group, to tell each other your names and where you're from and your major. And then if you could also, between the 3 of you, or the 4 of you, I should say, I'm going to give you a term from the map quiz. Develop, based on the readings and your own background knowledge, a couple of sentences to identify this location, what you know about it, and why is it important, perhaps, in the history of Japan. And this is, again, not asking you to read the whole book yet, but just to sort of use your own knowledge, and then also using what you had in the book so far to answer that question of why this place matters. So I'm going to pause the share, and I'm going to go back to Zoom and create breakout groups for you guys.
I have a quick question.
Is that Daniel? Yes.
Yeah, so the reading that was due today, are the lectures going to be about what we read, like the content that was in the reading that was due?
For the most part, yeah. I'll try to add to it or complicate it or sometimes add more depth, but we're kind of dealing with the readings that are from that day in lecture.
Okay, yeah, because there's just like a lot of information, and I wasn't sure if I was going to miss some of it, so if it was going to be talked about like in lecture.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes go over the material a bit more in depth. It's a pretty short intro, so I won't go over it in too much depth, but you know, it's kind of if I just repeat the textbook, then students don't get much out of class. If I don't, you know, then sometimes there are holes. So I think it's sort of a balancing act, right? So I will try to balance giving you more information and going deeper, but also trying to give you the overview as well. So yeah, good question, Daniel. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm gonna put you guys into breakout rooms. So name, where you're from, and your major, and then why. I'll give you each a city or a plot point on why it's important. Okay. All right. So this should be there. Okay. Opening the rooms. Okay.
Professor, I accidentally left the breakout room, but we discussed everything. So is that okay if I'm just chilling in here?
That's fine, Ashley. That's all good.
Okay. Sorry.
That's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and close the rooms and bring everybody back together. Okay, I think we're mostly back here, so let's go ahead and get started. So just a little chance to get a little acquainted with each other across the digital space and to get our minds thinking about Japan a little bit. So I'm not gonna go through all these for the sake of time, but I will grade these with Devin, and we will have them back for you soon. But let's go over a few of these. Let's talk about the first group. I asked you to talk about Honshu. So the first group, who was in the first group? The Honshu group.
I was.
All right. So Dan, would you tell me one of your classmates' names from your group? First of all.
Carrie, I think, and then I don't remember the others.
Okay, Carrie, that's good. All right. Would you like to tell us, Dan, a bit about Honshu?
Okay, so it's the mainland of Japan, so you'll find Tokyo and a bunch of major cities there. So you could expect like the majority of the population of Japan to be there. And also we mentioned that all the major features, the two plains, Kansai and Kanto, and Mount Fuji are there.
Okay, so you've got some important landmarks that are there, and this is the main island of Japan. Okay, that
Yep.
was fantastic. Let's go to the group that had, let's see, how about group 3? You were working on Hokkaido. Who had Hokkaido?
I did.
Is that Eric?
Yeah, Eric, Ferris, Alan, Ryan. But yeah, we were pretty much just talking about like the main cities, Sapporo and Hakodate. It's very mountainous terrain, but it's got a cooler climate, things like that. Because we didn't really read too much about it in the assigned reading, because it wasn't really, I don't know, I guess relevant, I guess.
Yeah, and we'll talk about why, but you're right. This is a new part of Japan in the modern period, so not historically part of Japan, and that's why it wasn't touched upon. Very astute. Okay, very cool. How about the group that was working on Fukushima?
Me.
Okay, is it pronounced Tarun? Tarun. Okay, so tell me your classmate that was in your group, and then where they came from, or where they're from, and then just give me a few facts about Fukushima.
Like where I'm from?
No, that your classmate that you in your group.
Oh, just any one of them.
Yeah, any of them.
Okay, so there was Ellie in our group, Elizabeth.
Ellie, yes.
And she said she's living in Massachusetts currently.
Okay. Fun.
Okay,
All right.
so a bit about Fukushima. So Fukushima is in the main island of Japan, Honshu, where majority of the population lies, and like it's more of a prefecture, like rather than a single city, like a region, and it lies in between the Tokyo region, which is a major metropolis, and on the south, and on the north, it's bounded by Sendai. So it's like south of Sendai and north of Tokyo, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's it's well known for a major nuclear meltdown that happened in 2011 because of a major tsunami. There was a nuclear meltdown and an accident in which one person died. But since then, uh, the people of Fukushima have recovered very well, and through like collective efforts, they've reduced a lot of the negative effects of that disaster, of the nuclear fallout. And right now, it's kind of restored back to normal in that region. Not much of of what was the situation back then. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that was very informative, right? Fukushima is the site of the Daiichi nuclear disaster, which we'll sort of come to that at the end of our class. And it is actually also between important places, right? It sort of is a no man's land in some ways, and that is part of why they put the reactors there. People who live there obviously don't feel that that was very fair. So that was, I think, a good description. So thank you guys for talking about these things. It was a little bit of self-education and discussion and also some introductions. So now I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and I'll mention some of these sites you guys talked about and the ones that you didn't talk about as we go along. Okay? I have to share my screen first here. You can't see it. Okay, so here we're back to the PowerPoint, right? You can all see that, I think. So the two major plains of Japan are the Kansai plain down here, on the yellow map, and the Kanto plain, which is in the northern north of the Kansai plain, but still in Honshu here. This map has some strange things, but this is a map more or less that should represent where things are in Japan proper. Missing from this map are some other sites like Okinawa is on this map and its capital Naha, but the other sites are mostly on this. The other sites are mostly on this map. So let's talk about landscape. This is a question for you all. You know, I guess I'll just mention though that sort of Japanese civilization really takes off in the Kansai plain, so down here in between Nara, Kyoto, Osaka, and then eventually moves from about 1600 on to be more concentrated in the Kanto region after 1600. And so we have these two major metropolitan sites, and that's where the culture in Japan, again, really takes off. I wanted to ask you about the landscape, though. So, like, based on what you read, what kind of landscape or sort of topographical feature dominates the landscape in Japan?
It's highly mountainous and made of entirely volcanic rock, which is pretty interesting.
And I can't actually see who's talking. Was that Ben?
Khalil.
Khalil, okay, I can't see you on my list. Oh, there, okay. So yes, Khalil, the mountains are a very important and dominating geographical feature. Why does that matter? Why is that important to in history class to know that that this feature of Japan's geography is so prevalent?
Because is due to the prevalence of mountains in the region that would impede the forming of a cohesive civilization until reliable transport across them could be achieved.
Yeah, definitely, right? So transportation, communication, these things are very difficult to achieve. And so geography really is an important barrier in Japan. And so although it's a small country, the people in Japan have in fact been separated by mountains for most of their history. And so the story that I do in my pre-modern class is really of how Japan sort of begins to come together as a united country over the centuries across all these mountains. So that's very important. How about population? How does the mountainous nature of Japan impact population, sort of how people gather and where they live, those kinds of things?
The mountainous terrain means that people are like congregated into the two plains, the Kansai and Kanto plain.
Yeah, right. So these two locations where people are able to farm and to live most successfully and safely, and just more easily, right? So this is an important feature as well, and that again helps to explain some of the developmental processes that Japan has gone through. Okay, so we've got mountains, we've got some geography. Let's talk now a little bit about natural disasters. I think that sort of mountains and natural disasters are two important points that are sort of, they should be paramount in our minds when we think about Japan. So what natural disasters sort of hit Japan the hardest, most frequently, based on your readings?
Earthquake and tsunami.
Volcanic eruptions.
Volcanoes,
and earthquakes. And I think earthquakes and tsunamis are sort of related, right? So, I think that you've got those, I think, clearly from the readings. Volcanoes, Japan has many active volcanoes still today, but the eruptions of those volcanoes historically have impacted people's choices where to live. And they've had more, I think there's some stats in the book, but they've had more major eruptions than anywhere else in the world in their history, even in the past couple of decades, or I guess now about 3 decades. So there are mountains everywhere. The mountains oftentimes catch on fire and lava erupts out of them. There's tsunami that come and destroy entire villages and seaboards of Japan. And there are also earthquakes that obviously are detrimental. So how do the Japanese deal with all of this danger, right? All this uncertainty around nature?
I think they adapt to it, really. They build the structure around it, from the government to scientific technology.
So they adapt, right? And they increasingly, sort of try and build structures that will allow them to withstand and survive disasters. But most of that actually happens a little bit later on, I think. We're talking about modern adaptation in that sense. But they do definitely try and find ways to mitigate the damage. So that's one thing, right? The Japanese, for example, built houses and cities that were easily taken down and moved if they happened to be near volcanoes. They built their house on stilts when they were close to sort of very active wave zones. There was also adaptation happening before now, so that's also a good point. So they're being careful. They're looking out and being proactive, and they're also trying to move quickly if they need to. How else would you argue the Japanese have tried to handle all of this dangerous, catastrophic natural energy around them?
Religion?
Yeah.
So Ellie says religion. Yeah, that's a really important one as well, right? The Japanese have for at least 2 millennia revered mountains and the earth, and the forces causing natural disasters were often identified as divinities, and I want to get to that next. So let's talk a bit about this religion called Shinto, which I think is very much involved in how the Japanese deal with the uncertainties and dangers of nature, as well as many other things as well. Let's see if I can get, okay, lots of mountains, all the dark dust mountains there. Beautiful mountains dominate even our collective images that we have of Japan are dominated by mountains as well. And okay, that okay. So Shinto is largely tied to the natural power of nature in Japan, and I want to talk about two concepts that we can sort of use as we go through the class that are important in Japanese culture that come from Shinto. One is the concept of kami. This is the character for kami here. Kami would be a divine entity. We don't usually use the word God. It's a bit more complicated than that. But it could be the wind or the thunder, or the sun or mountains, rivers, trees. It could also be an ancestral spirit. So the worship of these spirits has been in part believed to lessen the damage, right, or to mitigate the damage, or sometimes to avert entirely the damage that nature can wreak on Japan. And I'll tell you a brief story that I think demonstrates that pretty well. This is the story of a very well-known Confucian scholar, Sugawara no Michizane. He was a court advisor at the court at this point it was in Kyoto, the Heian court, and essentially there was some factionalism, and he found himself on the wrong side of the infighting, and he was exiled to Dazaifu, but wrongfully, right? He was wrongfully treated and unjustly treated, and he died in exile. And Dazaifu, as we'll discuss, was a little bit, sort of in terms of Japan's geography, Dazaifu is at that point very far away from the capital. No one wanted to go there. It was sort of the backwater, backwoods. It was close. It's just very near Fukuoka today in Kyushu. So it was a hinterland that no one wanted to go to from the capital. And so he died very sad and unfulfilled in Dazaifu. But then, during the month of his death, things started to happen in the capital in Kyoto. There was lightning, and there was heavy rains, and a lot of people in the Fujiwara family, who were the ones behind the government at that point, they died. Fires broke out, and there were floods. So all these catastrophes happened within weeks of Sugawara no Michizane's death. And so very, very quickly, the imperial priests, the Shinto priests, realized that the spirit of Sugawara had been, was seeking retribution, right, for how he was treated, and needed to be pacified. And so his spirit, given the name Tenjin, that was so disastrous for the capital, was pacified. They built shrines all over Japan to Tenjin, and this indeed did lead to the end of a lot of these disasters. And his kami is one of the more commonly revered kami in Japan today for that reason. So we think about Japan and Japanese when we think about nature, and we think about pacifying and handling nature and appeasing vengeful, angry spirits if necessary, or kami. Another important thing I want to mention is the idea of purity. Ritual purity in Japanese is harai, and this is an idea that is a bit complex, but basically that you must separate the pure from the impure in Japanese culture, right? There is an imperative to keep things that are dirty, ritually impure, things like blood and disease, but also things like sort of killing or death, things that might seem improper. Those must be separate from, although they're also necessary, they're separate from the things that are pure. And this is an important dichotomy that has defined Japanese culture for the past 2 millennia. So, there is a whole class of people in Japan up until recently who have been required and have inherited the obligation to handle dead animals for tanning, those kinds of things. And these people are, they're considered ritually impure, although they're also necessary. And so it's a very difficult situation to be in, but this helps to keep some balance between the different, between the pure and the impure in Japanese society. So purification is one of the goals of Shinto, and that is how do we separate and eliminate impurity where it appears. I'll also mention a few more things that you might have seen. The Temizu, if you go to a Japanese shrine, is where you enter a shrine and then you purify your hands and your mouth before you enter the precinct of the shrine so that you are ritually pure. And you're entering sacred Shinto space when you pass through Etori, which is this pretty iconic, famous gate that you see here that separates the secular or the mundane from the religious, spiritual, sacred inner space. And Japanese really take Shinto very seriously, and it's part of their lives, on a daily basis. People go to shrines to pray for good fortune, but also to make offerings and to worship their ancestors. But they also go to shrines for major events. This is a matsuri. A matsuri is a festival, and communities as a whole they build entire community festivals around shrines, like this one in Gion and Kyoto. This is one that my favorite one is in Fukuoka. Yeah, Hakata Gion Yamakasa Matsuri. And these are beautiful, elaborate festivals. The biggest festival, probably in terms of numbers, is Hatsumode. Everyone goes on New Year's Day to begin the year at a shrine. So Shinto was a very important part of Japanese culture, and these currents of purity and impurity and of natural awe, right? They really are embedded in the culture, no matter how far into the present we get. So I want to talk very briefly and lastly about the parts of the culture of Japan that are not distinctly and originally Japanese. This is Ise Shrine, which I don't know why. This is perhaps an important thing to mention in that this is the shrine of the imperial family. The imperial family that has identified their family has a tutelary kami, but that is we'll get to that more as the class moves on. So anyway, thinking about Japan's neighbors, if you think about how far Japan is from its closest neighbor, it's 130 miles from between Fukuoka and Busan in South Korea, and over 500 miles between Fukuoka and the closest points in China. So that's pretty far. And although it's easy to assume that the cultures, that these places are closely tied together, they're geographically actually quite far apart. France and England are about 20 miles apart, right? They have different languages. The cultures have evolved differently. The one country has a queen that is still alive, and the other one has shown its dislike for the monarchy quite brutally, right? So to assume that Japan and South Korea, or Korea as a whole, and China are united culturally is overstating something that I think that's it's important not to do that. But so Japan has the ability, because of its location, to sort of be selective and to bring in things that it thinks are going to help its culture and advance its society over time. And China was the first and foremost provider of important imports, culturally, intellectually, et cetera, religion as well, and materially as well, for Japan. So, I mean, rice cultivation comes from China around 300, sometime between 300 before the Common Era, and so somewhere between 300 BCE and 300 CE. It makes its way from China to the Korean kingdoms, and then to Japan. And rice is, still the heart of economies in Japan for the most part, or at least it was up until very recently. Technologies traveled that same route from China through Korea to Japan, and these are rice paddies that you see here. And this is a fact of life. Even we have photography in Japan, still was rice planting. Writing also comes from China for Japan. Japan's writing system was not existent until they were able to begin to use Chinese characters. And this is an important import that defines their culture as well. We talked about that last class about kanji a little bit, and the kanji, but also the hiragana are all Chinese or Chinese derived characters. This is Japan's first written history of itself by its imperial families, recording some oral history that's recorded of the imperial family's ascent to power, other things. And it's written entirely in Chinese characters. Buddhism comes from China through Korea as well. Also, hugely defines Japanese society as well. We talked about Shinto, and Shinto is a religion that is very prevalent in Japan, but up until the 1800s, Buddhism had become more popular and more powerful than Shinto. And so they were actually working closely together, these two religions, up until the modern period when they were separated forcefully for political purposes. And another important import that comes from China through Korea is Confucianism. And we'll talk about that a bit more as we move forward in the class as well. But the culture and the political structure of Japan heavily relies upon Chinese political structures that are rooted in Confucian ideology, an ideology that underlines the importance of hierarchy, a status of those who work in a given profession to stay in that profession and to stay at their place in that hierarchy. The capitals of ancient Japan, we talked on the map, quiz about Nara, or used to be called Heijo, one of the earlier capitals of Japan, and it was built entirely on a Tang Dynasty style grid. This is the major religious sites in Nara today are very much indebted to Chinese architecture and techniques, technologies. Kyoto, or in the Heian period, the next capital, also very much relying upon Chinese urban planning and architecture as well. And this image here is just to sort of mention that, they have a Shinto shrine with the Tori here, located next to a Buddhist temple, because these were very sort of symbiotic and collaborative religions for most of Japan's history, and not separate as you might be led to think. And lastly, I'll mention in terms of how society functions, I mentioned Confucianism. There was a class structure, but it became even more rigid after about 800 because of the arrival of Chinese Confucian ideologies from China and also through Korea. The emperor on top of society, and then beneath them, the aristocracy and the military, and then after that, everyone else. And it looks, over time, more or less like this, with the emperor at the very top of society, and followed by the military aristocracy, the warrior class, and then both the leader of the warrior class and then the local feudal lords and then their samurai warriors. And then below that, we have the peasants and the artisans, and at the very bottom, we have the merchant class. This is a Confucian hierarchy of society that Japan was trying to enforce and trying to advocate. But there are several things in this that are not accurate. First of all, the shogun had the real power in Japan, not the emperor, after 1185. Second of all, the merchant class, because they don't actually sort of do any real producing things with their hands. They are the lowest class in Confucian ideology, but in Japan, especially in the early modern period, they are very wealthy and are definitely not the bottom of the social hierarchy. So we'll talk in class a bit more about this structure as it takes shape in the early modern period. But the ideal was definitely from China. So I think I will stop there for today. We can see that Japan has a lot of interesting and distinct aspects, but some things may also ring a bell if you read about other countries in Western Europe or in Africa or in India. There are things there are also lines of similarities there that I think you'll be able to pick up on as we go along. So I look forward to seeing you guys on next week on Tuesday, and we will begin to talk about Japan's final unification into a country where people actually had the same language. They tried to bring technology and ideas and language and practices across the boundaries of the mountains, and to have some identity of Japan as a unified, centralized state. All right, so thank you all, and I will look forward to seeing you on Thursday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, excuse me. What about for discussion? Should we have anything ready?
So for this week, no. This week, just go to the discussion, and I think Devin has got some things planned. But he will. It'll be good to have read the readings that we'll do today, and to be ready to get acquainted with Devin and your classmates, and to take some notes, and launch things from there.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. All right, Devin. So that was all right. Do you have any questions at this point?
Nope. No, I'm good. I'm all set.
Okay. I think I'll be able to ask the person at my house to put the books out for you. Is there a time that you think you'd like to pick them up? Like is Saturday better than Friday, or like what are your?
Yeah, Saturday morning should actually work really well for me, if that's at all possible for them.
It's fine. Yeah. So I will ask her to put them in a box on the porch for you for Saturday morning. Okay.
Okay. That sounds good.
Right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Devin.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.